and welcome back to the second night of our Running on Full Power seminar. We are so glad you have joined us again. Last night we explored the remarkable possibilities of human vitality when we tap into nature's formula for body-mind strength. Tonight we continue the journey with a topic at the very heart of sustainable whole-person transformation, fueling your body-mind. We are honored once again to have with us Dr. Ernest J. lifestyle medicine advocate, personal growth speaker, and author of the Full Power Plan. His ability to blend science, story, and practical tools makes these evenings not only informative, but truly life-shaping. Thank you for taking this time for yourself and for being part of this experience. Please join me once again in welcoming Dr. Ernest J.
Well, thank you. How are you all doing? I see you made it through the traffic. Yes, I was just sitting there in traffic, and I thought to myself, I'm so glad I live in Parksville, Vancouver Island. You know, there's one reason why I left Abbotsford, 4 years ago. So anyway, yeah, we're going to continue on. I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a quiz. For those of you who weren't here last night, I'm going to depend on those of you who were here last night to tell those who weren't here what they missed. So I'll have a few slides there, something we showed last night, and I'm going to say, what did we get? Any insights that you got from last night? And then we can carry on today. But before we begin, do you mind I have a prayer right now? So let's pray. Our Lord in heaven, Lord, we just pause a moment to recognize your presence, your invisible presence. Lord, I pray that you somehow move our minds. Give us thoughts that we hadn't thought about before as we seek to grow, have personal growth, and find ways to enjoy life with joy and happiness and a sense of purpose. And Lord, we need strength for that. We need energy for that. So Lord, I pray you help us. Come into our hearts, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Well, let me see. I'm thankful to Elijah for getting us all set up here as we go along. So now I'm going to press the button, see if it works. Yeah, it works. It's hard to see that. I don't think it's the color that I put it in. But we've transferred. I did the program in Keynote for Apple and then had to convert it to PowerPoint. And in the conversion, it loses something. So if you see any mistakes, let's just blame Microsoft for that. So, but that's my email up there, earnbreak@gmail.com. So you can email me and say, you know what, you mentioned that handout on the Full Power description. Could you send that to me? You can say that. Or I might say something, I say, just email me and I can send that to you. And so eventually I'd like to get it all on the website called fullpower1.com. Right now you can go to fullpower1.com and you'll see the book. And it'll talk all about the book, it's got a good book and stuff like that. And you can sign up and get some email and stuff like that. But I just want to let you know that there is the email. So in the book called the Full Power Plan, Full Power is an acronym. Every letter of Full Power represents a health principle from nature, from Mother Nature. And so right now we've done this. We haven't really, we've introduced it last night. Last night we basically said, what are the possibilities? And we gave you scientifically proved evidence. We gave you stories of things that happen to people which we would ordinarily say are impossible, but when you apply the principles, they become possible. It's just that we don't usually want to apply the principles because French fries taste too good to give up. So that's a little bit on that. And then now, tonight, it's Prioritize High-Octane Fuel. And I'm going to now ask you a question for those of you who are here. I put up on the screen a car. Why did I do that, and what was that illustrating? Anyone tell me? The car. I had two cars, as a matter of fact. One was a junk car, and the other was a souped-up car. What was it called? Someone says a Lamborghini. It was a Ferrari, but I mean, for us normal people, they all look alike. A Lamborghini, Ferrari, whatever. Yes, and the idea was that we are manufactured by a creator who says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalm 139. And if the Ferrari is a high precision machine and you want to take care of that very expensive, valuable piece of machinery by putting only high octane fuel in the car, then how much more do we want to treat our bodies, which are high precision machines, 1,000 times more precise and complicated than a Ferrari. And so this is the analogy that we're using here. So thank you for remembering that. And so again, what else did you learn from last night? Anyone? What kind of things came out last night? Just hands up from anywhere. Last night, what else did you learn? Okay, no hands. Let me ask you this. Did you learn anything? Okay, now that's a good start. I think Doug, you're Doug, right? Diet? Yes, fruits, nuts, vegetables, and that we will talk more about today. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else from last night? Anything else? Do you remember any? Yeah, go ahead. Oh yeah, grandma and the little girl. Yeah. Yes. Right. Oh, and I'll share some more on that. Some other stories. Yes, please. Yes. It's, we make the claim, if we eat right and exercise and get good sleep and all that stuff, then we can even reverse some of the diseases that we have. No promises for everything overnight, nothing like that, but it is possible. And we shared some of that in the science as well. What was this picture meaning? This one I showed last night. So what is this one? Even if you weren't here last night, and this is your first night, you probably know what that's all about. Because here they are mopping up the floor, putting all their energy, all their attention, and in the analogy, all their money, on something that's not really going to do the job. So what ought they to do? Just go to the sink and turn off the tap. In other words, treat the disease at the cause, not at the symptom. And that's what this message is about. Full power are the principles that are at the root cause of disease or of health, one way or the other. So yeah, what's the next one? So in a sense, you could consider that Ferrari having an engine with cylinders in it. Let's say there's 9 cylinders, and each cylinder is a health principle. So the idea here is, watch this, is to fill up on those cylinders so that we can take a look at our habits that are relating to each of the principles of full power. And tonight, it's the letter P of power, the P-O-W-E-R-P, prioritize high-octane fuel. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're like organic machinery, and organic machines need to have good fuel to run on to make our bodies go. Most of us have somewhere between 30 to 60 trillion cells in our bodies. And every single one of them need to have fuel that makes them work well. And every time we eat a bite, we're helping them get healthier or we're harming them, one or the other. And when enough billions of cells get ruined, then we start feeling symptoms in our bodies. So tired or whatever it may be. And that's how it's like. So in the book, and this is, there's almost like 3 levels. The entry level of life change, the standard level of full power life change, and then the intensive level, the intensely therapeutic level would be for if the doctor said to you, you have 1 year to live, you better get your act together or you're going to die. That level. And then you do everything you can, because you want to live. So there's 3 levels. And so you check out your own life and measure yourself on the habits that you're doing. And we've categorized those habits based upon the 9 principles. 10 habits for each one. And so that's why I have 10, 10, 10, 20, 10, 10, 10, 10. And so if you fill out, and I can give you this, again, I can email this to you or it's in the book. Welcome here. Then you can fill out this and you find out where you're at on how are you doing on the good habits. And there's like 90 of them, and that's only 90 out of 1,000 that we could be doing, but I picked the top 10 of each one. And so in a sense, if you get 100, then, well, if you get 100, that means that you're Superman and having a good day. That's what that means. No one gets 100. The last time I did it, I got 78. And I don't think I'm quite that high even now. So anyway, so that's what it is. So any thoughts or questions from last night before we go on to tonight's topic? All right, you ready to go? All right, full power, letter P, P-O-W-E-R, prioritize high-octane fuel. So what was that fuel that fueled the body of Francis, Fred, and John? Those are 3 stories we told last night. Frances Greger was the grandmother, 65 years old, living in Florida, and she was going to die with heart disease, and she went to the Pritikin Longevity Center, and in 21 days, when she couldn't walk at all, she was in a wheelchair, in 21 days, she's now walking 10 miles a day. Why? She was fueling the cells of her body with high-octane fuel, and that created healing inside of her body. Plus more than just eating, of course. It's more than just food, but tonight we'll talk more about food. So something else we mentioned last night, but I'll kind of say it more clearly today. We saw this in the CHIP program, Coronary Health Improvement Project. Those of you who've heard about that before, I was involved in that, and some of you were too as well. The CHIP program, Coronary Health, changed its name. Do you know why? I know it got sold out a few years ago, and now it's owned by a group in Australia. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when Hans Deal saw what was happening in all the CHIP programs across America and in parts of the world. He noticed, he observed, he saw the effects. It wasn't just helping your heart. If you have diabetes, it was helping that too. If you have lung disease, it was helping that too. Even if you had brain fog, not frog, brain fog, it helped that too. And so here was a discovery. The eating pattern and lifestyle that prevented heart disease also prevented and reversed diabetes as well. Why? Because the underlying mechanism is the same. One doctor said to a relative of mine who was in her 70s, and she got a stroke. And she got a stroke while having an operation on a knee replacement, which was terrible. And the doctor said to her, who told me, that a stroke does not relate to the heart disease. And the doctor is wrong, I have to say. Because on the surface, yes, a stroke happens in the brain and heart disease is in the heart, 2 different organs of the body. But the fact is, both of them run on blood vessels, on the nervous system. And so if you have a blockage in a vessel near your heart and it's blocked, and it stops the blood from going further, that means the muscle that's needing that blood is not getting the blood, and you have a heart attack. But if you have a stroke, it's exactly the same thing, but only in the brain. The blood is blocked, and what's happening beyond where the blood needs to be, a part of the brain, is not getting that. So it's not getting the oxygen, it's not getting the food, it's not getting what it needs, and we call that a stroke. But the mechanism is the same, whether it's the heart or the brain. And so we can, and this is what we're discovering the last 10 or 20 years. Dr. Dean Ornish is one of the ones who are kind of sharing this with us, that what you do to help your heart also helps if you have diabetes, to reduce the risk of all these chronic diseases. And so Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who wrote the China Study, he's written a number of books, and he's, I guess, one of my heroes, Dr. T. Colin Campbell. He says, nutrition is the master key to human health, nutrition. And he says that in spite of the fact of what medicine and surgery does. And so do you think that I'd be recommending that we all go to the store? I don't know if we have any Baskin and Robbins in Canada. We do? How do you know this? In Surrey, okay. Yeah, so they are all around. Well, Baskin and Robbins is what kind of a store? Ice cream, right? I think they sell candy and cookies too. A lot of sugar, right? So the owner of Baskin and Robbins, the founder, Irvine Robbins is his name. He died a few years ago. He got sick. Now, he was a multimillionaire. His business was worth almost $1 billion. Had all these Baskin and Robbins all over the place. And he had a son named John who he wanted to take over the business, John Robbins. And John was going to, but then he understood and he learned that ice cream is not good for you. And he had a moral dilemma because he wanted to have a healthy body, and here his dad was having a business that made people sick. Now, most of us like ice cream. I like ice cream. So I'm not talking about how good it tastes. I'm talking about its reaction inside the cells of our body. And so John, he left the business. He gave up $1 billion business. He was going to inherit it. He would have been a multi-millionaire. When he was a child, he swam in a backyard swimming pool in the shape of an ice cream cone. That's how he grew up. He left it all behind. And he moved to a place, what the article said was, an island on the coast of Canada. We here in BC call it Salt Spring Island. And this was back in 1973. And this is him here. This is John Robbins back in the early 70s. And he has a child named Ocean Robbins. And he writes a book. The book is called A Diet for a New America. You know that book? Yes. Back in the early 70s. And his father doesn't talk to him. Years pass. Now his dad is getting sick. He has heart disease, he has diabetes, he has obesity. He has metabolic syndrome, which relates to fat around the belly and everything else that goes with it, high blood pressure, all that stuff. He goes to the doctor over and over again, and finally the doctor says, listen, you know what you need? And his doctor, this is Irvine Robbins' doctor, says, I have a book. You need to read this book. And Irvine Robbins looks, and it's the book his own son wrote, called A Diet for a New America. He hadn't talked to his son for years. He's mad at him for leaving home and doing all this good work to help people out. And so here he is right now, just after, here, I don't know, it's probably taken somewhere maybe on Salt Spring Island or so. Well, after this, he was 70 years old when that happened, 70 years old. And the doctor said, you're not going to live very long. You keep on eating all that ice cream that you're producing. Sorry, I know you're a rich, powerful man, but you're going to die very soon because of what's happening in your body. And so Irvine Robbins, the founder of Baskin-Robbins ice cream, decides to read his son's book, which by now had become a famous book, a New York Times best-selling book, and started a whole new movement in the 70s about eating well and eating, fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables, stuff like that. Now, instead of him dying within the year, he lives until he's 90 years old. He has 20 more years now left to live. And that enabled John and John's son, Ocean, to be able to have their granddad around for 20 more years. So there's an example. There's an example of how when we change what we eat, changes how we feel. And we're talking about how you feel is determined by what we do. And if we change what we do, we change how we feel. And so this is kind of the whole concept of full power. By changing what we do, we change how we feel. Well, I was sharing some of these things about diet and food and exercise and rest and sleep and healthy relationships and healthy spirituality and having a purpose in life, all these things together. I was sharing this in Kelowna. There's a lady sitting in the front row whose son lived in Taiwan. She calls her son, says, you got to get earned break to come to Taiwan. So just a few months ago, I went to Taiwan. Taiwan, I think, is not there, but up there. There's China, here's Taiwan, right there. But I want to talk to you about what happened in the Marshall Islands. I went to Taiwan, and they told me more about other places and all that kind of stuff. The Seventh-day Adventist Church happens to have a health resort in Taiwan. A swimming pool out front, not the shape of an ice cream cone, though, but it's a swimming pool. It's really nice. And so I had a chance to share these principles over there with the Taiwanese. There's a lot of Taiwanese people, but a lot of the people actually were coming from other countries. But in the Marshall Islands, I want to tell you a story about the Marshall Islands. In the Marshall Islands, diabetes was once ranked as, of all the countries in the world, the Marshall Islands had the most diabetes of all the countries. Like, that's a lot of diabetes. And before that, it didn't. As a matter of fact, back in the 1950s, there's only 3 cases of diabetes. Just 3 in the 1950s. And then the Marshall Islands started importing all this food from America. American food, right? And now in 2006, 30% had diabetes, like 1 out of 3. How many of you, if you were 1 out of 3 had diabetes, how many? 1/3 of you would have that. That's a lot of people. And so, they wanted to do something about it. And here's what they're eating: Spam, donuts, ramen noodles, and Coca-Cola. And that is not what you call high-octane fuel. That is, I won't tell you the word, but it's a bad word that we put into our bodies. Hospital admissions were due to diabetes. 50% of everybody who went into the hospitals went in because of something to do with diabetes. And they didn't have a good sleep as well. They'd get up and use the bathroom all the time. They had pain in their arms and their legs and their joints. And half the surgeries that were ever done were due to amputations due to diabetes. So this was the case in 2006, like just 19 years ago, here in the Marshall Islands. Well, there's a group of Seventh-day Adventists who called in some people to help out and say, you know what? We have a health message. We can do something about this. And so they called in a few people, and I'll put her up on the screen, one of them, and they started to apply the principles that are in the Full Power Plan. Now, they didn't call it the Full Power Plan because it wasn't out by that name, but the principles are still the same. And so then what they did is they gave them 100% WFPB. What does that stand for? WFPB. Get to know that acronym. whole foods, plant-based. Not vegetarian, not vegan, whole foods, plant-based. And they had 100% vegetables, fruit, raw nuts, seeds, what am I missing? Legumes, no, fruits, nuts, grains, food is grown. And that's what they fed them. They had a lot of high fiber, had 0 trans fatty acids. They had a lot of high antioxidants, low glycemic load, which is kind of low sugar, and moderate sodium, went down in sodium, etc. So now, what we want to do is tell you the difference in just 2 weeks. 2 weeks, 14 days on that kind of a diet. You could say it's the full power plan, but they didn't have full power back then. There's a decrease of the pain in their legs and arms and joints. There's a decrease in nocturnal bathroom visits. They used to need massages. They no longer needed them in order to sleep. And walking became easier. And there was an increase in frequency and bulk of stool, which is actually a wonderfully healthy thing. 90%, I repeat, 90% stopped taking their medications for diabetes. 90%. Now, that's why I couldn't guarantee that if you happen to be a diabetic, that you would get rid of your medications. But if you are a type 2 diabetic and you haven't been that for very long, chances are fairly good that if you changed what you ate, that you could get rid of your medications. Again, I'm not a doctor, not your doctor, to promise you anything, but chances are. And so they stopped taking their medications for diabetes, for cholesterol, blood pressure, and other meds. They stopped it all. Their fasting blood sugar decreased by 50 to 75 points, milligrams per deciliter, and their cholesterol went down by 20 points, and their triglycerides went down 40. It's hard to get pills to do that. But food and exercise did that in 2 weeks. What do you think of that? See, someone would say, that's a miracle. It's not miracle. It's science, the science of cause and effect, based upon principles that come from our Creator. But it's found in science everywhere we go. Tens of thousands of studies have shown it. Well, here's a lady they called in. Her name is Brenda Davis. She actually used to live in Kelowna. She's moved to Alberta now. And we actually had her at camp meeting in Hope a few years ago. So they called in Brenda Davis. And Brenda Davis is here on a YouTube interview, being interviewed, talking about the Marshall Islands and what they did. And here she says, this is the book they used, Defeating Diabetes, the no-nonsense approach to type 2 diabetes and the diabesity epidemic, so obesity and diabetic together. And then she shows these pictures. This is Dr. Young. He has a seminar called Undoing Diabetes, Diabetes Undone. He's got a program called Diabetes Undone. He's a Seventh-day Adventist doctor. And he was working with our hero. Now, the fact is, it worked. The Marshall Islands have changed, all because we applied the science of cause and effect. Now, a lot of people would be thinking at this time, you mean they had to give up all that wonderful food? All that Coca-Cola they couldn't have anymore? No more Spam anymore? No more ramen noodles? I love ramen noodles. They're nice and salty, you know, and just so comforting and stuff. We have to talk about our taste buds because we can't trust them. Our taste buds are connected to pleasure centers in the brain. And our taste buds are saying, go ahead and eat the sugar, salt, and fat. Meanwhile, our cerebral cortex says, no, that's not good for you. Don't eat the sugar, salt, and fat. And our pleasure centers of the brain are saying, I'm going to eat it. And we have this battle. And if any of you have read the Bible, Romans chapter 7, do you know what it says there? The Apostle Paul is saying the things I want to do are the things I don't do. The things I don't want to do, that's the very thing I do. It's the battle. In the Bible, it's called a battle between the flesh and the spirit. In science, it's the battle between the midbrain and the higher brain. It's kind of an interesting parallel there, isn't it? And so Dr. T. Colin Campbell, why is it going back so fast? I got to go ahead now. Head. Got to go through all that now. Can you help me out, Elijah? Are you there? Just advance the slides. Just press the play button. Just keep on going. Keep on going. Keep on going. Yeah, thank you for that. And stop. Thank you very much. So Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who wrote the China Study, also wrote a book called Whole. And this is kind of the theme I want to share with you today. We are a whole being. Our brain is attached to our heart, is attached to our stomachs. Our minds are attached to our bodies. What happens in our bodies affects our minds. What happens in our minds affects our bodies. We are a whole being. And we can't separate out something. If we take a pill, for whatever it may be, I guarantee you that pill will not only affect the thing you want it to affect, but it'll affect other things as well in the body. Sometimes we call that side effects. But Dr. T. Colin Campbell says there's no such thing as side effects, only effects. The pill has an effect on all these things. And we can't narrow down the effect we want the pill to have. We're not that smart. And so we just produce all these pills, and we hope for the best, that it's going to affect the thing that we want it to. And often it does, and I'm glad that they're there. But they also affect, there might be 99 things it's affecting in the body, and the one thing we say there was doing, but all the there's 99 side effects. And sometimes if you go to the pharmacy, they give you the pills with sheets of paper. What's on the paper? All the side effects. And often, and they have to do this legally, sometimes death is a side effect. You think, do I even want to take this anymore? I could die. Well, the chances are quite low you're going to die, but they have to put that in there. And so what I want to do is find out, is there a way that we can relieve ourselves of that stress and anxiety? I'm not saying go off your pills. If you're on pills, I'm saying, well, what if you could lower them? Lower them and have not as much of a need. Dr. T. Colin Campbell addresses this. He says, rethinking the science of nutrition. So, principle number 1, holistic versus reductionistic. I want to talk a little bit about that. Principle number 1 is holistic versus reductionistic. This is actually a picture taken out of his book called Whole. I just took my camera, just took a picture of the page. This is the lower part of the page. And anyone who's taken biology or nutrition will know something about the Krebs cycle. Anybody here heard of the Krebs cycle? Raise your hands. Yeah, a few of you have, because you've read about it and stuff. And so the idea is that when we eat food, and then we chew it, we bite it, and it becomes liquid, it goes down into our stomachs, it gets digested. And when it gets digested, digestion is just another way of saying breaking down the molecules. So you got a big molecule, and you cut it in half, and you cut it in half, cut it in half, cut it in half, take this off, take that off. That's called digestion. It just gets smaller and smaller. And each time it gets smaller, it becomes a metabolite. It's a metabolite. And so the Krebs cycle is different metabolites, the cycle that it goes through in its digestive process. Now, it's way more complicated than that. So if you know about it, forgive me for oversimplifying it. Dr. T. Colin Campbell says, that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's nowhere near that simple. And then he says, what you need to understand, that this is a little bit more like it. This relates to this, and that relates to that. If you do this, it affects the other thing. He says, you know what? Even that's the tip of the iceberg. Our bodies are 1,000 times more complicated than even that. And then he has this on the next page. Now, we're getting a little bit closer to the reality of how our body works. Now, who are we as humankind to try to figure out one drug that will affect just one thing without it affecting something else. Because whatever happens to one thing has a chain reaction to something else in the body. And that's why sometimes we end up taking medications to help offset the side effects of the other medications. And soon we have this dependency on the pharmaceutical industry, which they love, because if they heal you, they lose a customer. So they need to I don't mean to be too negative on the pharmaceutical industry, because I'm glad that they're there. So if you are in the healthcare industry, thank you for what you do. I'm just saying, is it possible that we can alleviate you a little bit of the stress that you're under by being healthier, so the lineup to go see the doctor is not as long, so the waiting list can get shorter and shorter. And so if we can understand that, what do we do about that? So I'm going to come to an answer. T. Colin Campbell says, Western science and medicine says, we now operate under the paradigm that looks for truth only in the smallest details, while entirely ignoring the big picture. I ran into this myself. Some of you know that I'm doing a PhD in lifestyle medicine. So I'm talking to my professors online, and I have this idea for a project, and my idea is, what if I could test the full power plan and see if it makes a difference? Take their blood beforehand, have them go through the program, and then take their blood afterwards and measure the difference. They say to me, that's too broad and too vague. You need to do one thing and measure its effect on one thing. This is a PhD project, and there are probably 1 million of them that are like that. One thing's effect on the other thing. And that's understandable. It's called science. But Dr. T. Colin Campbell says, and I agree with him, that we need to see the big picture. That when we affect just one thing in our body, we have to understand that affects 100 other things in our body. And that science hasn't gotten down yet. Just hasn't got that figured out yet. And so we all know that we need our vitamins and our minerals. I'm not going to read them all, but you kind of see them there, some of them. Vitamin A, vitamin B1, B2, B3, vitamin K. How many knew there isn't even such thing as a vitamin K? Well, there's a vitamin K. Are you getting your vitamin K? If I could do a marketing campaign to make sure you get your vitamin K, because if you don't get your vitamin K, you're going to die. I better go get my vitamin K. I just found out I had to get vitamin K. Well, guess what? You can still get your vitamin K, not worry about it, if you eat enough fruits, grains, vegetables, and grains and nuts and stuff. Now, we need to get this. We need to get these minerals as well. Well, here's something else we need to get. Water, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and fiber, amino acids, antioxidants, and omega-3 fatty acids. Well, we also need something else as well. I'm going to need your help, Elijah. I'll just press the button for it to go on. You have phytonutrients, electrolytes, vitamin D, choline. Go ahead, Elijah, press the next button for me. Thank you. We need trace elements. I'm not going to read it all, but we need prebiotics and probiotics and coenzymes and cofactors, and we need phospholipids as well. Elijah, next one. And so hormones and neurotransmitters, we need all this stuff. And there are markets and there are products that help every one of these. Every one of these. And you can go to, they call it a health store, but they sell pills in bottles. They call it natural foods. I'm telling you, if it's a pill, it's not natural. What's natural is the apple. That's natural. If it's a pill, it didn't grow that way. And so if we break it down into isolated parts, we kind of get into trouble because we are a whole body. And the isolated part, we're not parts. We're together. We're all together. What affects one thing affects something else. Let's see if I can press a button and make it work here. No, okay, Elijah, I'm going to need your help. So what Colin says, Dr. Campbell says, relax. You don't need to worry about getting all the vitamins and phytonutrients. He says, if we eat the whole foods plant-based way, that eliminates the need to worry about the details. Just eat lots of different foods, plant foods, and your body will do the math for you. That's quite an insight. It's a paradigm shift for some people when you think about it. And here's just an example there, whole foods for the whole person. Now, here we are. Here is you can say a whole person. Cut off the legs there. And we have the liver with the stomach, the intestines. We got it all going on inside there. Lungs aren't showing. And so what we want to do is understand how to make that work. Now, that is made up of trillions of these. What's this called? That's a cell. Now, cells have all kinds of different looks, but here's a generic kind of a look of a cell in your body. And you've got 50 trillion of those. Now, some counts, some people say you have 10 trillion. Some people say, no, you have 80 trillion. Most of the literature that I've read says 39 trillion. I don't know why, 39. I haven't counted. So if you want to count tonight, let me know tomorrow how many cells you have in your body. But this is quite a picture there. When you think about it, just take a look. We have what's called organelles, the nucleus, the DNA is in there. And what's this called? Anyone know? Yeah, that's the mitochondria. Most of the cells in our bodies have 200 or 300 of those. They are the what? Yeah, the power plant, the furnace that burns energy. And then it produces something called ATP. Adenosine triphosphate. And that produces a lot of stuff that we need to make our bodies work, to make our bodies go. It's all produced there. And it's just amazing. You look up the cell membrane of the wall. Just look it up on a YouTube video. It's just a piece of work, I tell you. How food gets in through the walls, through these protein cylinders that can open and close and let things in or block things off from getting inside. It's just amazing. And the thing is, what gets inside that cell is determined by what we put into our mouth. And that cell needs to have high-octane fuel to make it work well. And if it doesn't get the high-octane fuel, it begins to shut down. Eventually, it dies. Another cell is born to take its place. And so we end up, and the more of that, the faster it goes, the sooner we die. And so we die when our cells die, kind of thing. And so this is just an amazing picture of a cell. It's one of the best pictures I've seen, actually. Here's a little bit of a close-up. There we go. And can you imagine? We are fearfully and wonderfully made. This is so intricate. And that's just 1/50 trillionths of what we're made up of. It's just amazing how we are created and how we're made. Well, now, so we think that we want to take care of ourselves and ourselves. The process of nutrition is profoundly holistic, not reductionistic. In that the way the body uses a particular nutrient, in other words, what gets into the cell and the way our cells use the nutrients, depends on what other nutrients are ingested along with it. Why does that matter? Well, let's take, for example, vitamin C. Vitamin C, we need vitamin C. Vitamin C is important. It's very important. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was thought to be a miracle drug almost. And everybody had to take vitamin C. And so they're getting loads and loads of vitamin C tablets. But you know what? They were kind of misinformed. We need vitamin C, but we need all the other ones too, together, because they work together. So if we just take an isolated vitamin C pill, we miss out on the cast of supporting characters that may give vitamin C its potency or its power or its effectiveness. Let me see if I can explain. Let's talk about vitamin C as an example of reductionistic thinking. Let's compare vitamin C in tablet form with half of an apple that's chopped up. Okay, the apple that is chopped up, it's natural food. It comes from a tree. The way it's grown is the way you eat it. And compare that to the vitamin C pill. And they did that. So you take 100 grams of fresh apples, that's a half a cup, right about there. That had an antioxidant vitamin C-like activity. Do you know what antioxidants are? Maybe a little bit on that. Remember I showed the cell membrane, the wall around there? One of the things that free radicals do because of the electrical charge in the body is they grab something out of the membrane of the cell, weakening the cell. These free radicals. They go around, they steal things from healthy cells, and they make them less and less healthy. So antioxidants, they kill those bad guys. So we want to have a lot of antioxidants so we can keep our cells healthy from being, from the free radicals stealing from the cells. Now, I'm oversimplifying, but I hope you get the idea. So 100 grams of fresh apple had the antioxidant vitamin C-like activity equivalent to 1,500 milligrams of vitamin C. So just in a half an apple, 1,500 milligrams of vitamin C, the equivalent activity level. But, let's see now, it cleans that. When they chemically analyzed that 100 grams of apple, they only found 5.7 milligrams of vitamin C. But yet, it was acting as if it was 1,500 milligrams. It was only 5.7. But it had all that power as if it was 1,500 milligrams. And so you end up with this concept. It was far below the 1,500 milligrams that the level of antioxidant activity associated with vitamin C indicated. Meaning, look at the power of what 5.7 grams of vitamin C can do. Wow, look at that. You would think there's 1,500 of them in there, but there's only 5.7. Now, interesting thing here, when we put the comparison together, the vitamin C, therefore, in the apple is 263 times more potent than the vitamin C in an isolated vitamin C tablet. Do you see the point here? Do you see that? And apples aren't even famous for vitamin C. What's famous for vitamin C? Usually oranges and grapefruit, like citrus fruits. Apple's not even a citrus fruit, and look how powerful it is. And so this is what Dr. T. Colin Campbell is trying to tell us. When we eat food the way it's grown, it's actually more powerful than taking those tablets, which are isolated. They're isolated. And I thought that was an excellent point because we are indeed fearfully and wonderfully made. Well, then he says this. The same is true for any nutrient isolated from the whole food. And then he includes these things: vitamin E, beta-carotene, omega-3, and all the other foods that we think, oh, I got to get my omega-3s. I got to get my omega-3s. Well, guess what? Don't take it as isolated pill. Take it in the food. Have walnuts. Get your omega-3s or something like that. And so that's from the book called Whole. So plant-based foods in forms as close to their natural state as possible. Whole foods, we call it. Eat a variety of fruits, raw nuts, seeds, beans, legumes, and whole grains. This is true medicine. So the guiding question should be, I see some food in front of me. Is that healthy? Is that harmful? What is it? Here's the guiding question. Does it grow on a tree, bush, vine, or garden? If it grows that way, it's most likely healthy. Unless you're eating flowers. Don't eat flowers, Don't eat, poppies, whatever. Where do they make cocaine from? From poppies, or is that heroin? Cocaine comes from poppies. Someone once said to me, opium. Those drugs, right? Say, oh, that's natural. comes from plants, so some plant-based. That's why we're not saying plant-based, we're saying whole foods plant-based. Because, beer comes from natural sources. But beer is not whole food plant-based. It's plant-based, yes, but not whole food. And so that's the difference. So ask yourself, does it grow that way on a tree or in your garden or on a bush like berries or on a vine like grapes or something like that? So the good news is we don't need medical breakthroughs or genetic manipulation to achieve, maintain, and restore vibrant health. Half a century of research, both mine, says T. Colin Campbell, and that of many others, has convinced me of the following. I had to press it twice and I skipped through 2 slides. Now I'm going to go backwards. Let me see. I need your help, Elijah. Go back 1. There we go. Yeah. What you eat every day is a far more powerful determinant of your health than, what does it say? Your DNA. Or most of the nasty chemicals lurking in your environment. Yeah, our DNA matters. The environment matters, but not nearly as much as the food we put into our bodies. Not nearly as much. The food we put into our bodies matters more than our environment around us and the DNA that we have within us. Let me see if I can press this and go. So Elijah, can I just use you now? Just go ahead and press the next button there. Now, I'm going to put a few slides up just as an illustration of what it looks like, whole foods plant-based. This is what we're talking about, high-octane fuel that fuels the 50 trillion cells in our body to make us reduce those symptoms of chronic disease. Go ahead, Elijah, next one. What are they? Blueberries. Next one, Elijah. Carrots. Next one. Strawberries. Next one. Beans. You see, this is the way plants grow. And that's the way they're meant to be eaten to be the best nutrients for our bodies. Next one. Is it sprouts? Alfalfa sprouts, perhaps? Next one. Grapes on a vine, right? Next one. Raspberries. I love raspberries. Next one. There's a garden. All kinds of stuff growing in that garden. I was talking about these things I was in Nova Scotia last year at an Adventist camp meeting there, Pugwash. And there's a little girl, she's 7 years old. She has a garden just like that. And the mother, took a picture of it and gave it to me, and I put it up on the screen for everybody to see. And I said, if a 7-year-old girl can do it, why can't I do it? Have my own garden, and grow my own high-octane fuel. Next one, Elijah. And next one. And next one. So you get the idea? So next one. And I'm going to read this now from one of the most wealthiest men in the world. His name is Ray Dalio. He said, I start from the premise that nature is smarter than I am. I thought, I don't know what he believes about God or nature. I don't know. But here he is, one of the wealthiest men in the world, and he's got this philosophy that nature is smarter than him. I kind of like that thinking. And try to let nature teach me how reality works. And there's something in the Bible that says we reap what we sow. It's kind of like a section of the cause and effect, foundational scientific principle. We have a cause, it has an effect. That effect is the cause of the next effect. Hence the domino effect. And he's kind of talking a little bit about that. Okay, next one, Elijah. So we talked a little bit about the holistic versus reductionistic. I think you got the idea, I hope. The next principle we actually talked about last night. First causes versus symptoms. So you think of the series of dominoes. You knock over one domino, knocks over next one, next one, next one, next one. And the last domino to fall is the symptom that we see. It's the heart attack. It's the diabetes diagnosis. And we take drugs, medications, so that doesn't happen. And that affects the second last domino. But what we want to do is affect the first domino, hence root causes. and the fullpower, full power, are the root causes that have that domino effect to the last domino. So first causes versus symptoms. Principle 3, which we've kind of hinted at just now, is nature's remedies versus manufactured remedies. We need to talk a little bit more about that, because often, let me ask this. You've heard of AA? What does that stand for? Alcoholics Anonymous. You heard of NA? Narcotics Anonymous. Heard of OA? Overeaters Anonymous. It's a real thing. I looked it up. You heard of, have you ever heard of Broccoli Eaters Anonymous? Can you imagine a group of people addicted to broccoli? And they're sitting around. They say, "Hi, everybody. My name's John." "Hi, John. I have this story to tell you about my broccoli habit." Can you imagine that? No. Why? Because nature made broccoli, and the stuff we get addicted on, nature didn't make, man makes it. And that's an interesting difference. Whatever we get addicted to, alcohol, drugs, smoking, junk food, sugar, salt, fat, that kind of stuff, the stuff that we get addicted on, that's manufactured by human beings. It doesn't grow that way. So we don't get addicted on what Mother Nature produces. We get addicted on what human beings produce, and they extract it out of Mother Nature, and they mix it up with something else. So now, having said all that, I now would like to talk about the difference between what's healthy and what they call healthier. Now, let me see if I can put it this way. The green represents what's healthy, and the red represents what's harmful. So healthy food would be at a +10. That would be an apple, carrots, almonds, all right, onions, fruits, nuts, grains, vegetables, and legumes, right, beans, lentils. So that's a +10. Now, the -10 would be red meat. No, processed meat is actually -10. Red meat would be like a -9 and a little bit less harmful. And then Coca-Cola, soft drinks, and processed food, all like hyper-processed, like potato chips. And I love potato chips. I'm a recovering potato chipaholic. And I'm recovering from this. I'll talk more about that on Saturday night. I'll tell you my story. But anyway, so we have this. Now, let's just say you're looking on the TV, or YouTube, internet, or you're in the grocery store, and you see something that says 30% less sugar or low salt. And you're thinking, that's healthy. I'm going to eat that. Now, here's what I'd like to share with you. All right, let's just say something, a product was a -9. It's unhealthy, full of sugar and fat. And then they come out with, okay, now it's 30% less. Now it's a -4. My question to you is it now healthy? My next question to you, is it healthier? That's a little fuzzy. It may be more accurate to say it's less harmful, but it's still harmful. So when we put that, when some advertisement says, this is healthier, it may not be healthy. It may be their way of saying, it's not as harmful as we used to make it. But it's still harmful. And so keep that in mind now when we talk about what's natural versus what's manufactured, okay? So usually what's healthy is what's nature, and what's harmful is what's refined. Refined foods versus natural foods as we go along. Does that make sense? So T. Colin Campbell again. You can tell I really like him, T. Colin Campbell. Avoid heavily processed food and animal products. Stay away from added salt, oil, and sugar. Aim to get 80% of your calories from complex carbohydrates, 10% from fat, 10% from protein. Often when people talk about carbs as bad, I get a little frustrated because an apple is a carb, but it's complex carbs. Potato chips are carbs, but it's simple carbs. And so when people say carbs, now, in culture, carbs are given a bad label. But you've come here to this seminar, and now you know there's a difference between simple and complex carbs. So when someone says, oh, I have to stay away from carbs, you can say, yeah, but what kind? Be more scientific. What kind of carbs? Complex carbs are good for us. So now, if the WFPB, Whole Foods Plant-Based eating pattern, were a pill, it prevents 95% of all cancers, including those caused by environmental toxins, just the food we eat. It prevents nearly all heart attacks and strokes, Whole Foods plant-based. Can you imagine a pill doing that? I think if you could manufacture a pill that would prevent most cancers, I think you'd become a billionaire because you make a lot of money. But guess what? You don't need a pill for that. You just need Whole Foods plant-based for that. Now, if you look at this here, what does that look like to you? Pardon? It does look like a Band-Aid, doesn't it? But it isn't. Looks like one. Another guess? A blood vessel? Let's go for a blood vessel. We have a Band-Aid looking blood vessel. And we have the white blood cells, even though they look blue, white blood cells carrying the power to resist diseases and virus. We have the red blood cells, which carries the hemoglobin, the oxygen and stuff. And all this should be flowing through our blood vessels. And the edge, the inner lining of the blood vessel needs to be nice and slippery. So all of our blood can just go right on through. And give all the food out to all the cells all around. That's what's supposed to happen. Sometimes instead, what happens is over time, because of what we eat, food, especially fatty foods, create little cracks inside the endothelial lining of the blood vessel. Those little cracks don't make it smooth anymore, and then food comes along and gets lodged into that, and that kind of builds up, and it's called cholesterol. It's called like fatty acids, lipids they're called. And that of course creates a narrowing of the arteries, which increases what? Yes, stroke possibilities, blood pressure, and all that kind of stuff. And so you can see that what we eat affects, if it's near the heart, cardiovascular disease. If it's in the brain, risk of stroke. But it's the same underlying mechanism. And so what we eat makes that happen or not happen, as whatever the case may be. Depends what we eat. So I'll go back to this again. If Whole Foods plant-based were a pill and has an effect on what's inside the artery, then it can reverse even severe heart disease. It can prevent type 2 diabetes so quickly and profoundly that after just 3 days on this drug, Whole Foods plant-based, if it were a drug, it's dangerous for users to continue to use insulin. We just had a program, we call it 1 Week in Paradise, just did a few months ago. A lady comes and she has obesity. She can't walk very well. She has 2 canes that she walked on. And she had high blood sugar and high blood pressure, had it all going on. And she was taking metformin. How many know what metformin is? Yeah, it's what a lot of people take for diabetics. And so our doctors said, we're going to take you off of metformin. She was terrorized by this. How could you take me off metformin? So they gave her one of those kind of little tiny machines, a circle, and they fastened it to the back of her arm, and it monitored her blood sugar every minute of the day. And that was sending signals to the iPhone of the doctor and the head nurse that were there. So the doctor said to her, don't you worry, we're monitoring your blood sugar. We're going to know if it shoots up too much. So with that, with fear and trepidation, she went off her metformin. And her sugar went up, but they took care of it with food. This was several months ago. I met her, just about 3 weeks ago. She's lost about 40 pounds. She doesn't need her canes anymore to walk. Her blood sugar is down to normal. She hasn't taken metformin ever since, and she was on it for 20 years. I just saw her just a few weeks ago. She was visiting a sister in Parksville, and we went for a little walk together, my wife and I and her. It really does make a difference. It really does make a difference, the food that we eat. So if you ever want to do this, talk to your doctor if you happen to be a diabetic and you want to go whole foods plant-based. And if you're getting insulin, talk to your doctor to let him know what you're going to do so we can monitor what's happening there. So the food you consume can heal you faster and more profoundly than the most expensive prescription drugs, and more dramatically than the most extreme interventions with only positive side effects. Eating the whole foods plant-based way eliminates the need to worry about the details. I'm putting this slide again just for emphasis. Just eat lots of different foods. Your body will do the math for you. And when we want to do science, how much time do we have? Time to stop pretty soon? 5 minutes, let's say, yeah. Yes. When I get to talking about this, I'm kind of like a wind-up toy. You just wind me up and set me going, and I just keep on going. But here, what science does is you want to have a test group and a control group. So let's just say you take 100 people, and with 50 of the people, you give them a certain diet, and the other people, you do nothing. You go a month, maybe 3 months, and you check the difference to see if the 50 people, called the intervention, what difference it made in blood pressure or weight or whatever it may be. So that's a scientific test. Sometimes the best kind are the random controlled trials, RCTs they're called. And so here's a case when they are trying to represent these two groups with rats in a laboratory. So here's a man, he's a research scientist at Brown University in Rhode Island. And so they have one rat, and they put him on the equivalent of a whole foods plant-based diet. And then they take him, and we're going to show a little video of this. They take him by the tail, and they drop him into a vat of water. And rats don't like, to drown. So they're going to swim around as much as they can to find land, right? Well, there's no land, but there's a little island there. And so they tested, and they count, this is him pressing the stopwatch, they count how many seconds does it take for the rat to finally find that little island in the middle of the water. And they do that with a rat with a brain that's been fed the equivalent of whole foods plant-based. Fruits, nuts, grains, vegetables, legumes, etc. And then they do that with another rat that his brain was fed with refined foods, or the equivalent of high-processed foods. So they had two kind of rats. And so they do the experiment. Now, I'll show it to you. Let me see how it goes here. There we go. There's the coming in. Got the rats. If you don't like rats, you can avoid your gaze if you wish. Take it out. Here we are. Take that little guy up. And he's in the water now. Looks almost like milk, really, but anyway. And he's found that right away. Look at that. So they timed him. Now here's the rat that was fed processed food. Potato chips, ice cream, the equivalent of that. He's not finding that island. It's right, there it is. Oh, he's right, oh man, it just went right by it. His brain is not working as fast. And the other researcher is explaining what's happening. Says we humans are like one of those two rats. That's an oversimplification. And so she's explaining, oh, he finally found it. Oh, there it is, finally found it. And so now the one researcher is saying to the other researcher, well, here is what the difference is. The first rat on the healthy diet found the island in 5.2 seconds. But the other rat on the refined food diet, it took 36.2 seconds. And so the lady scientist is explaining that's kind of like us humans and how food affects our processing power. And so when we have a problem to solve, we need to have, it's literally fuel that helps us solve problems with the neurons in our brains and connecting to other parts of our bodies through the nervous system. And so, and this rat experiment seemed to be a good almost metaphor or an example of what humans are going through. So it may be that brain fog that we have could be coming from refined foods, as we're seeing right here. And you look it up, you do some research, and you find out that children in classrooms, when they're given enough water to drink and then healthy food to eat, their grades go up, especially if you take them off sugar. They go from like a C average to a B average. It's just amazing. It just affects our minds, affects the way we think. So which one do you think is the healthy one? Which one do you think is the healthy one? How much of that would you like to eat tonight? I won't ask. How about that? The blue zones are you've heard of the blue zones? The people live the longest and all that. The 5 original blue zones are right here, and so we see that a lot of what they ate happened to be whole foods plant-based. Not 100%, but most of it. And that's why we say prioritize high-octane fuel. I think I'll go through this very quickly. Clint Eastwood is on that diet. Maybe I'll end with this slide. What time is it right now, Pastor? No, tell me the time. What? Okay, well, I might go one more slide. In the science, we'll say this is a green box, yellow box, and a red box. Kind of like the street lights. A red light, orange light, and a green light. So the green light, the green box, is the foods that most of the science, almost all of the science, agrees with are healthy for you. Now, the other box in red is the food which most of the science says are not healthy for you. Like there's very little debate. What's in the middle is what there's debate on. Okay? Poultry, eggs, dairy, fish, there's debate on that. Some people say, oh, you need it. Some people, oh, no, you don't. Some people say, well, look at that scientific study. Yeah, but look at the other one. And so there's debate on that. But there's very little debate on what's in the green box. So what I'm sharing with you is the green. I know there's some debate out there on some other things. I understand that. But what there's no debate on is that apples are good for you. Maybe some of you are thinking, what about the spray they put on the apples? What about the spray? Get organic apples as much. I know they cost more. Better for you. But listen to this. The spray they put on the apples, you can wash a lot of it off. But compare the surface of an apple and maybe a few millimeters down into the apple with spray on it compared to a chocolate bar. The chocolate bar is 100% poison, not just the surface, but everything inside too. The apple is maybe, if you want to call it poison, just on the surface, and we can wash as much of that off as we can or get organic apples. And so the chocolate bar itself, while we say, okay, we shouldn't eat apples because of the spray, so what do? We eat chocolate bars? See, that's not logical. That's our science. Our bodies would see the difference in that. Would feel the difference in that. Anyway, a little bit on that. And so here are kind of some foods that we can call high-octane fuel. So here I am in the kitchen, just what? My wife took this picture of me just, oh, never mind, okay. So the idea is the more green you eat, the more lean you can be. Go to nutritionfacts.org and get all your questions answered right there. There's so much. If you're taking notes, I'd write that down. Nutritionfacts.org with Dr. Michael Greger. If you don't want to do that, just go to your phone and get an app called Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen. And you can measure what you can eat every day. Put check marks on there. Anybody ever heard this before? Dr. Greger's Daily? Yeah, some of you have already. I have that on my phone. And here's some high-octane food. I'm not going to read that. Just go through this. Just want you to see the ideas of whole foods, plant-based eating, the nuts and the fruits and the vegetables. And this is whole foods plant. This is high-octane fuel for these organic machines we call the human body. I do need to talk about this because people say, where do you get your protein from? If you're going to quit meat, where are you going to get your protein from? That's a question that was answered 40 years ago, and 30 years ago, and 20 years ago, and 10 years ago. Perhaps ask the strongest land animal in the world where he gets his protein from. Where does he get it from, by the way? From plants. That elephant gets his protein from plants. What about the strongest mammal, the land mammal that walks on two feet? The great ape. 10 times stronger than the strongest man. What fuels his muscles? It's not meat. It's protein that comes from greens in the plant kingdom. What about the charging buffalo or the galloping stallion? Where does he get his protein from that fuel those muscles? They come from plants. We do not need to eat meat to get our protein. As a matter of fact, when we eat too much, when we eat meat at all, it's actually too much protein and comes in toxic levels. Well, here's a human being who went to the Olympics in 2016. He said his physical and mental well-being improved significantly upon cutting animal products out of his diet. Anyone here know who this person is? Yeah? That's Venus or her sister. Serena, could be, I think it's Serena. Looks like Venus. She said, I fell in love with the concept of fueling. I like that word, fueling your body in the best possible way. Not only does it help me on the court, the tennis court, but I feel like I'm doing the right thing for me. And then she says, my fridge is really just vegan. Coconut water, cucumbers, mint, kale, vegetables, ginger, wheatgrass. Some people would say, what a boring place to eat. Well, look what she does on a tennis court, though, right? She's a world champion. And this is what she's doing to fuel her muscles to make them go. How old do you think she is? Well, I don't know exactly how old she is, but she happens to be a medical doctor. And she says, eating the whole foods plant-based diet has given me incredible strength in comparison to when I was in my 20s. That's why I asked, how old do you think she is? She looks like she's in her 20s right now. But anyway, she was in her 20s sometime in her past, and she used to eat meat and dairy at that time. She says, I'm able to push myself harder than ever before, and I feel amazing. My recovery time is shorter than ever. Now, a recovery time is when you move your muscles to exhaustion. Like, let's say you're doing dumbbells like this, and you can't do anymore, so you're just exhausted. And then you recover, and you can do it again. You time yourself between exhaustion to the time you can do it again. That's recovery time. That's how they measure your fitness level. How long does it take you to do it again? That's called fitness. And she says here, my recovery time is shorter than ever by eating whole foods plant-based. And I train every single day, despite my busy work schedule, as a medical doctor. So I'm going to skip that part. Skip that part. That's, guess who? Arnie. He was 69 years old when he went to that documentary called The Game Changers. And he was on a vegetarian, I don't think he still is, I don't know what he's doing now, but at 69, about 5 years ago, cholesterol, he says, is the lowest in my entire life. Eating vegetarian, that's what he said. He says, talk about meat and manliness. He says, you've got to understand, that's marketing. It's not science, that's marketing. It's not based on reality. Don't read what it says on the colorful packaging. Read what it says in the scientific studies. You get the real truth that way. Anyway, so I think no, I got to do this one more. Pastor, let me just have one more slide. All right, just 2 more. All right, bear with me. It's good. You're going to like this. So Arnold Schwarzenegger was like Mr. Universe, right? Big muscle man. Well, British Columbia has its own like muscle man contest. And they have it in Abbotsford, where I used to live. And no, I am not in that picture. But someone I know is in that picture. Now, he happens to belong to a Seventh-day Adventist church up in Salmon Arm. You're trying to guess who he is. Now, the interesting thing is, of all these men that came to Abbotsford, there's one of them who happens to be 10 years older than all the rest, starting with the next one. And so let me just narrow him down there. There he is. His name is Ron. He's the oldest. He's 63 years old. And he only eats whole foods plant-based, and he eats twice a day. He said he was hanging out with the other guys, and he said that he only had to lose 5 pounds to go into the contest. But the other guys who ate 5 times a day, and they ate meat to get their protein, they had to lose 30 to 40 pounds just to get into the contest. And the age was between 40 and 53. So when Ron wanted to go in the contest, he could not find anyone else his own age. He had to go with the younger guys, and he was competing with them, and I think he got second place. 63-year-old guy competing with guys in their 40s and 50s, and it's the 63-year-old guy who gets second place. So that tells you do not need to eat meat to get your muscles. He got his muscles at 63 years old. And of course, we know that as older we get, our muscles deteriorate. That's why we got to kind of work on it a bit more. So I'm going to end right there. And hopefully, this will give you a bit of hope that, yes, it is possible that if we are mindful of the fuel we put into these high-precision machines, that when we're mindful, it can really, truly make a difference in our body, mind, and vitality. Anyway, God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brake, for another insightful and energizing presentation. And thank you all for being with us tonight. We warmly invite you to join us again tomorrow at 7 p.m. for the final evening presentation in this series, Science of Willpower. But before that, we also have a special additional session. Dr. Brake mentioned yesterday, tomorrow we'll have around 11:30 a presentation with a message titled Awakened Brain. So have a wonderful rest of your evening, travel safely, and we look forward to seeing tomorrow.